Before Noah's flood, before Moses received the law, there lived a man who walked so closely with God. Enoch was translated to heaven, where he witnessed secrets that would shake the foundations of everything you thought you knew about angels, giants, and the end times. Hidden for centuries, his visions reveal the cosmic war between heaven and hell, the forbidden knowledge that corrupted mankind, and prophecies about a coming Messiah that predate Christ by hundreds of years. The fallen angels trembled when these words were written. Religious authorities tried to suppress them. But today, you'll discover why the Book of Enoch was considered too dangerous for most believers, and why its revelations about our world's hidden history will leave you questioning everything. Prepare to see the spiritual realm as never before. Long before Noah built his ark, there lived a man whose life would forever change how we understand the spiritual world. Enoch walked with God in a way that few humans ever have. The opening words of chapter 1 verse 2 paint a picture of his extraordinary calling. Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angels showed me. This wasn't just any vision. It was a divine appointment that would reveal secrets hidden since the foundation of the world. Imagine being chosen by the Creator of the universe to witness events that would shake both heaven and earth. Enoch wasn't a prophet by profession, wasn't born into a priestly family, and didn't seek out this calling. He was simply a man who chose to walk faithfully with God, while everyone around him was falling deeper into corruption. The Lord saw something special in Enoch's heart, a purity and faithfulness that made him the perfect witness for what was about to unfold. The angels who appeared to Enoch carried urgent news about a judgment that was coming. As chapter 1 verse 9 declares, "And behold, he cometh with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly." The heavenly messengers needed someone from the human race to record these visions, someone who could serve as a bridge between the divine realm and mankind. They chose Enoch because his heart was pure enough to handle the weight of what he was about to see. The story Enoch was called to witness begins with one of the most shocking events in human history. In the days of Jared, Enoch's great-grandfather, something unprecedented happened in the heavenly realm. Chapter 6, verse 6 reveals the stunning truth. "And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it." These weren't ordinary angels. They were watchers, powerful heavenly beings whose job was to observe and guard humanity. Picture Mount Hermon, that towering peak that rises above the landscape of the ancient world. It was here that 200 of God's own angels made a decision that would change everything. They didn't act impulsively or alone. This was a coordinated rebellion, carefully planned and executed. Their leader was an angel named Semjaza, and he knew exactly what he was asking his followers to do. Chapter 6 verse 3 records his words, "I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." He understood the magnitude of their rebellion, but his desire had overcome his loyalty to the Most High. The other angels shared his fears, but their desires were stronger than their devotion. So they made an oath together, binding themselves with curses if any of them backed out. They swore to go through with their plan, knowing full well it meant abandoning their posts in heaven and rebelling against their Creator. Mount Hermon became the launching point for a cosmic rebellion that would plunge the entire world into darkness. These watchers were about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. What the watchers did next shattered every boundary between heaven and earth. As chapter 7 verse 1 describes with chilling detail, "And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. The Watchers had been observing humanity from their heavenly posts, and somewhere along the way, observation turned to desire. They looked upon the daughters of men and found them beautiful. But this wasn't innocent attraction. It was a fundamental violation of the order God had established. Angels were created to be spiritual beings, servants of the Most High, not husbands to human women. Yet these fallen Watchers abandoned their spiritual nature entirely. They took on physical forms, descended to earth, and chose wives for themselves from among humanity. Each Watcher selected a woman, and they began families that should never have existed. The text tells us they defiled themselves, a word that speaks to the corruption of their very essence. But the corruption didn't stop with marriage. These fallen angels immediately began sharing heavenly secrets with their human wives. They taught them magic, showed them how to use plants for supernatural purposes, and revealed knowledge that was meant to remain in the divine realm. What started as forbidden love quickly became forbidden knowledge, flowing from heaven to earth through these unholy unions. The women who married these angels had no idea they were participating in a cosmic rebellion. They were simply human beings who found themselves chosen by powerful, beautiful beings who seemed to offer them everything. But they were unknowingly becoming the mothers of monsters and the first recipients of knowledge that would corrupt the entire human race. The children born from these impossible unions were nothing like the world had ever seen. Chapter 7, verse 2 describes what emerged from these forbidden relationships. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. 3,000 ells. That's nearly 4,500 feet tall. These weren't just big people. They were creatures of supernatural size and strength. The Nephilim, as they came to be known, were hybrids that combined the power of angels with human flesh. They grew rapidly, their appetites matching their enormous size. Entire communities couldn't produce enough food to satisfy even one of these giants. Picture the terror that gripped humanity as these monsters walked among them. The Nephilim didn't just eat food, they consumed everything humans had worked to produce. Crops, livestock, everything that people depended on for survival was devoured by these giants. Families watched helplessly as months of hard work disappeared in a single meal for one Nephilim. But the horror didn't end there. When the giants had consumed all the food that humans could provide, they turned to an even more terrible source of nourishment. They began hunting humans themselves. Men, women, and children became prey for these creatures who possessed the strength of angels and the appetites of monsters. The earth became a hunting ground where the Nephilim ruled through fear and violence. These giants didn't just kill for food, they established kingdoms of terror. They ruled over humans like gods, demanding worship and tribute. Anyone who resisted faced immediate death. The strong preyed upon the weak, and the supernatural strength of the Nephilim made resistance impossible. Humanity found itself enslaved to the offspring of rebellious angels, trapped in a world where they had become the prey. Among all the fallen Watchers, one name stands out as particularly destructive: Azazel. Chapter 8, verse 1 reveals the scope of his corruption. And Azazel taught men to make swords, and knives, and shields, and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets, and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. Before Azazel's influence, humanity lived in relative innocence. Wars were fought with simple tools, conflicts were settled through strength rather than sophisticated weapons, and people lived without the knowledge of how to kill efficiently. But this fallen angel changed everything by introducing the technology of warfare. Azazel didn't just teach humans how to make weapons. He revealed the secrets of metallurgy itself. He showed them how to find metals in the earth, how to extract them, how to refine them, and how to forge them into instruments of death. Swords became sharper, shields became stronger, and suddenly humans could kill each other with unprecedented efficiency. But Azazel's corruption went beyond warfare. He also taught women the arts of vanity and deception. He showed them how to use makeup to enhance their beauty, how to create jewelry to display wealth, and how to use cosmetics to change their appearance. What might seem harmless was actually the introduction of deception and pride into human society. The knowledge Azazel shared wasn't just practical, it was spiritual corruption. He taught humans to value appearance over character, to trust in weapons rather than in God, and to seek power through violence rather than through righteousness. Every sword forged with his knowledge, every battle fought with his weapons, every face painted with his cosmetics was a step further away from the innocence humanity had known. The impact was immediate and devastating. As humans learned to make better weapons, conflicts became deadlier. As women learned to enhance their beauty artificially, vanity and jealousy flourished. The simple, honest life that God had intended for humanity was replaced by violence, deception, and pride. Azazel wasn't the only watcher sharing forbidden secrets. The corruption spread as other fallen angels began teaching their own areas of expertise. Chapter 8 continues with a catalog of forbidden knowledge. And Barakel taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. Each fallen angel became a teacher of supernatural knowledge that humans were never meant to possess. Barakel revealed the secrets of astrology, teaching humans to read their futures in the stars rather than trusting in God's plan. Kokabel showed them the constellations and their hidden meanings, introducing divination and fortune-telling. Other watchers taught weather prediction, earth signs, and celestial navigation. This wasn't innocent education. It was the systematic corruption of human understanding. Instead of looking to their Creator for guidance, humans began trusting in stars, signs, and supernatural knowledge. They started believing they could control their destinies through magic rather than through obedience to God. The earth became filled with violence as humans used their new knowledge against each other. Wars became more sophisticated and deadly. People used astrology to manipulate others, employed weather knowledge for personal gain, and turned every aspect of creation into a tool for selfish purposes. The natural order that God had established was completely overturned. Chapter 9, verse 1 describes the result. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. The faithful angels watched in horror as creation descended into chaos. Blood flowed like rivers, lawlessness replaced justice, and the image of God in humanity was being systematically destroyed by forbidden knowledge. The cries of the innocent began rising to heaven like smoke from a sacrifice. Every act of violence, every use of forbidden knowledge, every corruption of God's design sent up a plea for justice. The earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of so much evil, begging for relief from the pollution that covered it. In the midst of all this corruption and chaos, Enoch received the most extraordinary calling any human has ever experienced. Chapter 14, verse 8, describes the beginning of his incredible journey. And the vision was shown to me thus. Behold, in the vision clouds invited me, and a mist summoned me. And the course of the stars and the lightning sped and hastened me. And the winds in the vision caused me to fly and lifted me upward and bore me into heaven. Imagine being lifted from the corrupted earth into the pure realms of heaven. Enoch didn't travel by his own power. The very elements of creation carried him upward. Clouds invited him, mist summoned him, and the winds themselves bore him into the presence of the Most High. This wasn't a dream or a spiritual vision. Enoch was physically transported into dimensions beyond human understanding. The journey through the heavens was both glorious and terrifying. Chapter 14, verse 9 continues, "And they brought me into heaven. And I went in till I drew nigh to a wall which is built of crystals and surrounded by tongues of fire. And it began to affright me." The first thing Enoch encountered was a wall of crystal surrounded by flames. This wasn't decorative fire. It was the burning holiness of God that consumed everything impure. As Enoch passed through each level of heaven, the glory became more intense and the fear more overwhelming. He saw the house of God built from crystal and fire, with floors of flame and ceilings of lightning. Chapter 14, verse 17 describes his terror. "And I looked and saw a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun. And there was the vision of cherubim." The throne room of God was beyond anything Enoch could comprehend. Crystal and fire, lightning and glory, the presence of cherubim with their multiple faces and wings. Every detail spoke of power and holiness that made Enoch tremble. He fell on his face, unable to stand in the presence of such majesty. This ordinary man from a corrupted world was witnessing the source of all creation, the judge of all the earth. The rebellion of the watchers would not go unanswered. As Enoch witnessed the glory of God's throne room, he also received the divine decree of judgment. Chapter 10, verse 4 records the command given to the archangel Raphael. "And again the Lord said to Raphael, Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light." The punishment for Azazel was swift and absolute. The angel who had taught humans warfare and vanity would be bound in a desert place called Dudael. Rough and jagged rocks would cover him, darkness would surround him, and he would remain there until the final judgment. The one who had brought so much corruption to earth would experience eternal isolation from light and freedom. But Azazel wasn't the only one to face judgment. Chapter 10, verse 11 describes the fate of all the watchers. "And the Lord said unto Michael, Go, bind Semjaza and his associates who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated." The leader Semjaza and all his followers would share a similar fate. They would be bound in valleys of the earth for 70 generations, a time period that would stretch from their rebellion until the final judgment. They would watch helplessly as their giant offspring destroyed each other in warfare, seeing the fruit of their rebellion turn to violence and death. The Nephilim giants themselves were doomed to destruction. God commanded that they be turned against each other, their supernatural strength becoming the instrument of their own downfall. Chapter 10, verse 9 declares, "And to Gabriel said the Lord, Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth, Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. The earth would be cleansed through the violence of the giants themselves, and then through the great flood that would wash away all trace of their corruption. Justice would be served, the natural order would be restored, and the rebellion that began on Mount Hermon would finally come to its appointed end. Enoch's second great vision begins with words that would shake the foundations of the world. Chapter 38, verse 1 opens with a promise that sends chills down the spine. The first parable. When the congregation of the righteous shall appear, and sinners shall be judged for their sins, and shall be driven from the face of the earth. This wasn't just another vision. It was the first of 3 parables that would reveal the most closely guarded secrets of heaven itself. As Enoch was lifted once again into the divine realm, he found himself standing before the throne of the Ancient of Days. The sight was beyond anything human eyes had ever witnessed. Chapter 47, verse 3 describes the overwhelming scene. And in that hour that Son of Man was named in the presence of the Lord of Spirits, and his name before the Head of Days. Here was the throne room where all destiny is decided, where the fate of every human soul is weighed in perfect justice. The throne itself blazed with glory that made the sun look dim. Surrounding it were beings of such power and holiness that their very presence caused the foundations of heaven to tremble. These weren't the fallen watchers who had corrupted the earth. These were the faithful servants of the Most High, beings who had never known rebellion or corruption. But what captured Enoch's attention wasn't just the glory of the throne room. It was what he saw happening there. The wicked of the earth were being brought before the throne for judgment. Kings who had oppressed the poor, rulers who had shed innocent blood, and all who had rejected the ways of righteousness found themselves standing naked before perfect justice. Chapter 38, verse 2 reveals their terror. And the righteous shall be in the light of the sun, and the elect in the light of eternal life. The days of their life shall be unending, and the days of the holy without number. While the righteous would inherit eternal light, the wicked faced a very different destiny. They would be driven from the face of the earth, cast out from the presence of God forever. The judgment wasn't arbitrary or cruel. Every deed had been recorded, every word remembered, every thought known. The throne of God operated on perfect justice, where mercy and righteousness met in harmony. Those who had chosen evil in life were simply receiving the natural consequence of their choices: separation from the source of all goodness and light. In the heart of this first parable, Enoch witnessed something that would transform how humanity understood salvation itself. Chapter 48, verse 2 reveals a mystery hidden since before the foundation of the world. And at that hour that Son of Man was named in the presence of the Lord of Spirits, and his name before the Head of Days. Before Adam was formed, before the earth was created, before time itself began, there existed a chosen one whose destiny was to save mankind. This wasn't a plan that God created after humanity fell into sin. The Messiah wasn't an afterthought or emergency solution. Chapter 48, verse 3 makes this clear. Yea, before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of the heaven were made, his name was named before the Lord of Spirits. The salvation of humanity was planned from eternity, written into the very fabric of creation itself. Enoch watched in amazement as he saw this pre-existent Messiah standing before the throne of God. This wasn't just a man who would one day be born. This was a divine being who had existed alongside the Father from the beginning. His role as Savior wasn't assigned to him later. It was part of his very identity from before creation. The vision revealed that this Messiah possessed wisdom that surpassed all understanding. Chapter 49 verse 1 describes his nature. For wisdom is poured out like water, and glory faileth not before him forevermore. He wasn't learning how to save humanity. He had always known. He wasn't growing into his role as Messiah. He had been the chosen one from eternity. This revelation changed everything about how salvation worked. It meant that every promise God had ever made to humanity, every prophecy about a coming deliverer, every hope for redemption was grounded in an eternal reality. The Messiah wasn't coming because humanity needed saving. Humanity needed saving because the Messiah was always coming. Enoch saw that this pre-existent Messiah was the key to understanding all of history. Every event, every person, every nation would ultimately be measured against this eternal standard. He was the light by which all other lights would be judged, the truth by which all other claims would be tested, the life by which all other existence would be measured. The second parable opened Enoch's eyes to mysteries that had been hidden from the foundation of the world. Chapter 46 verse 1 begins with a vision that would echo through the ages. And there I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool. And with him was another being whose countenance had the appearance of a man. And his face was full of graciousness, like one of the holy angels. This was the moment when the identity of the Messiah was revealed in its fullness. The figure Enoch saw wasn't just any heavenly being. This was the Son of Man, a title that carried weight beyond human understanding. Chapter 46 verse 2 reveals the scope of his authority. And I asked the angel of peace, who went with me and showed me all the hidden things concerning that Son of Man, who he was and whence he was, and why he went with the head of days. This Son of Man stood as an equal beside the Ancient of Days, sharing in divine authority and power. What made this revelation so shocking was how this mighty being had chosen to remain hidden. Chapter 62 verse 7 explains the divine strategy. For that Son of Man has appeared, and has seated himself on the throne of his glory, and all evil shall pass away before his face, and the word of that Son of Man shall go forth and be strong before the Lord of spirits. His power was absolute, yet he had chosen to work from the shadows until the appointed time. The Son of Man possessed authority over all creation. Angels bowed before him, the elements obeyed his voice, and even death itself had no power over him. Yet he had willingly limited himself, taking on the nature of humanity while retaining his divine power. This wasn't weakness. It was the greatest display of strength the universe had ever seen. Enoch watched as the Son of Man demonstrated his hidden power. With a word, he could destroy the wicked. With a glance, he could judge the nations. With a thought, he could transform the entire created order. Yet he held back, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal himself to the world. The vision showed that this hiding wasn't permanent. Chapter 48, verse 10, promises a day of revelation. And he shall be strong before the Lord of spirits, and the earth shall be renewed with righteousness, and all the wicked shall be driven out from the face of the earth. When the Son of Man finally revealed his true identity, the entire world would be transformed in an instant. In the midst of his second parable, Enoch witnessed something that filled his heart with hope beyond imagination. Chapter 51, verse 1 reveals a promise that would comfort the faithful through every generation. And in those days shall the earth also give back that which has been entrusted to it, and Sheol also shall give back that which it has received, and hell shall give back that which it owes. Death itself would be forced to surrender its captives. The vision showed Enoch exactly how this resurrection would unfold. It wasn't a gradual process or a spiritual metaphor. It was a literal, physical restoration of life to those who had died in righteousness. Chapter 51, verse 2 describes the scope. For in those days the elect one shall arise, and he shall choose the righteous and holy from among them. For the day has drawn nigh that they should be saved. Every person who had ever lived and died in faith would be brought back to life. Enoch watched as graves opened across the earth, and the righteous dead emerged clothed in bodies more glorious than they had ever possessed in life. These weren't the same bodies that had been buried. They were transformed, perfected, made ready for eternal existence. The resurrection wasn't just about coming back to life. It was about receiving a completely new kind of life. The dwelling place prepared for these resurrected saints was beyond anything earthly minds could conceive. Chapter 45, verse 4 gives us a glimpse. And on that day, mine elect one shall sit on the throne of glory, and shall try their works, and their places of rest shall be innumerable. These weren't temporary accommodations or shared spaces. Each righteous person would have their own eternal dwelling. But the most amazing part of this resurrection wasn't the new bodies or the glorious dwellings. It was the fellowship with the Son of Man himself. Chapter 62, verse 14 reveals the ultimate promise. And the Lord of spirits will abide over them. And with that Son of Man shall they eat and lie down, and rise up forever and ever. The righteous would live in perfect fellowship with their Savior for all eternity. The vision showed that this wasn't just individual salvation. It was the restoration of all creation. The earth itself would be renewed, cleansed from every trace of corruption. The righteous would inherit not just heaven, but a new heaven and a new earth, where righteousness would dwell forever. The third and final parable revealed a reversal so complete, it would shock the world. Chapter 53, verse 5 opens with words that would make the powerful tremble. In those days shall the kings and the mighty perish and be given into the hands of the righteous and holy. Every throne built on oppression would crumble. Every crown worn through violence would be cast down. Enoch watched as the mighty of the earth, those who had seemed untouchable in their power, were brought before the throne of judgment. These weren't common criminals or ordinary sinners. These were the kings and rulers who had shaped history through their choices. Chapter 62, verse 3 describes their shock. And the kings and the mighty and all who possess the earth shall bless and glorify and extol him who rules over all, who was hidden. The same rulers who had rejected God in life would be forced to acknowledge his authority in death. The reversal was complete and absolute. Those who had lived in palaces would be cast into darkness. Those who had commanded armies would find themselves powerless. Those who had hoarded wealth would discover they possessed nothing. Chapter 63, verse 1 captures their desperation. In those days shall the mighty and the kings who possess the earth implore him to grant them a little respite from his angels of punishment to whom they were delivered. But what made this judgment so perfect was its justice. These kings and mighty ones weren't being punished arbitrarily. They were reaping exactly what they had sown. Chapter 63, verse 10 reveals their recognition. And they shall be amazed and downcast, and pain shall seize them when they see that Son of Man sitting on the throne of his glory. They would finally understand that every act of oppression, every moment of cruelty, every choice to harm others had been recorded and would be repaid. The parable showed that worldly power was nothing more than an illusion. Chapter 46, verse 4 reveals the true source of authority. And this Son of Man, whom thou hast seen, shall raise up the kings and the mighty from their seats, and the strong from their thrones, and shall loosen the reins of the strong, and break the teeth of the sinners. Real power belonged to the Son of Man, and he would exercise it perfectly. The contrast was striking. While the wicked kings faced judgment, the righteous poor who had suffered under their rule would be exalted. Those who had been oppressed would become rulers. Those who had been despised would be honored. The entire order of the world would be turned upside down, revealing what had always been true in God's eyes. As Enoch's vision continued, he witnessed something that revealed the true hierarchy of heaven. Chapter 61, verse 10, shows the ultimate authority of the Son of Man. And he will summon all the host of the heavens, and all the holy ones above, and the host of God, the cherubim, seraphim, and Ophanim, and all the angels of power, and all the angels of principalities, and the elect one, and the other powers on the earth and over the water. Every angel, every heavenly being, every spiritual power served under his command. This wasn't a new arrangement created after his victory. This was the eternal order that had always existed in heaven. The same angels who had witnessed creation, who had sung when the earth was formed, who had served the Father from the beginning, all acknowledged the Son of Man as their commander. Chapter 40, verse 5 reveals their constant service. And round about were seraphim, cherubim, and Ophanim, and these are they who sleep not and guard the throne of his glory. Enoch watched in amazement as these mighty beings, each one powerful enough to destroy nations, bowed willingly before the Son of Man. The cherubim with their multiple faces, the seraphim with their burning holiness, the Ophanim with their wheels of fire, all served him with perfect joy and complete devotion. The vision revealed that these angels weren't just servants. They were warriors in his army. Chapter 40, verse 7 describes their readiness. And I heard the voices of those four faces as they uttered praises before the Lord of glory. They stood ready to execute his judgments, to carry out his commands, to defend his honor against any who would oppose him. But what struck Enoch most wasn't their power, it was their love. These angels served the Son of Man, not out of fear or obligation, but out of perfect love and willing devotion. They had seen his character, witnessed his justice, experienced his mercy, and chosen to follow him with their whole hearts. The contrast with the fallen watchers was stark. Where the rebels had abandoned their posts for selfish desires, these faithful angels had remained loyal through every test. Where the fallen had corrupted themselves through pride, these holy ones had maintained their purity through humility. Where the watchers had brought judgment upon themselves, these angels would participate in executing that judgment. The climax of the three parables revealed a division that would last for all eternity. Chapter 61, verse 8 describes the moment of ultimate separation. And the word of his mouth slays all the sinners, and all the unrighteous are destroyed from before his face. This wasn't a gradual process or a gentle sorting. It was a final, absolute division between two kinds of people. Enoch watched as the Son of Man took his seat on the throne of judgment and began the work of separation. Chapter 45, verse 3 reveals the standard. And in that day, mine elect one shall sit on the throne of glory, and shall try their works, and their places of rest shall be innumerable. And their souls shall grow strong within them when they see mine elect ones, and those who call upon my glorious name. The test wasn't based on wealth, power, or human achievement. It was based on whether people had chosen to follow the ways of righteousness. The elect, those who had been chosen by God and had chosen him in return, found themselves welcomed into eternal glory. These weren't perfect people who had never sinned. They were forgiven people who had trusted in the Son of Man for salvation. Chapter 58, verse 3 promises their destiny. And the righteous shall be in the light of the sun, and the elect in the light of eternal life. The days of their life shall be unending, and the days of the holy without number. But for those who had rejected righteousness, who had chosen evil over good, who had refused to acknowledge the Son of Man, the separation meant eternal punishment. Chapter 54, verse 6 describes their fate. And after that the righteous and elect one shall cause the house of his congregation to appear. Henceforth they shall be no more hindered in the name of the Lord of spirits. They would be removed from the presence of God forever. The separation was permanent and irreversible. There would be no second chances, no appeals, no changing of destiny after the judgment was complete. Chapter 62, verse 12 confirms the finality. And the righteous and elect shall have risen from the earth, and ceased to be of downcast countenance. And they shall have been clothed with garments of glory, and these shall be the garments of life from the Lord of spirits. What made this separation so profound was that it revealed what had always been true. People weren't divided into elect and condemned at the judgment. The judgment simply revealed which category they had chosen during their earthly lives. Every choice for good or evil, every response to God's call, every decision to follow or reject righteousness had been building toward this moment of final revelation. In the most shocking revelation of all the parables, Enoch discovered something about his own destiny that changed everything. Chapter 71, verse 14 contains words that would echo through eternity. And he came to me, and greeted me with his voice, and said unto me, Thou art the Son of Man, who is born unto righteousness, and righteousness abides over thee. And the righteousness of the head of days forsakes thee not. The Son of Man, whose glory Enoch had been witnessing, was somehow connected to Enoch himself. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or confused vision. The angel speaking to Enoch made it clear that there was a deep connection between the faithful scribe and the eternal Son of Man. Chapter 71, verse 16 continues the revelation. And he said unto me, He proclaims unto thee peace in the name of the world to come, for from hence has proceeded peace since the creation of the world, and so shall it be unto thee forever and ever. Enoch was being told that he had a role in the eternal plan of peace. The transformation wasn't just spiritual, it was complete and total. Enoch discovered that his faithful service as a recorder of visions, his willingness to serve as heaven's scribe, his commitment to righteousness, had qualified him for a destiny beyond imagination. He would share in the glory and authority of the Son of Man himself. But this wasn't about Enoch becoming divine or replacing the Messiah. Instead, it revealed that those who serve God faithfully will be so transformed by his glory that they will share in his nature. Chapter 71, verse 17, promises the scope of this transformation. And all shall walk in his ways, since righteousness never forsaketh him. With him will be their dwelling places, and with him their heritage, and they shall not be separated from him forever and ever and ever. The vision showed that Enoch's transformation was a preview of what awaited all the righteous. Those who walked faithfully with God in this life would find themselves sharing in the very life and nature of the Son of Man in eternity. They wouldn't lose their individual identity, but they would be so filled with his glory that they would reflect his character perfectly. This identification with the Son of Man meant that Enoch would participate in the judgment, in the ruling of the nations, in the establishment of righteousness throughout the earth. The humble scribe who had faithfully recorded heaven's secrets would find himself sharing in the administration of heaven's justice. A new chapter in Enoch's journey began when he was brought before one of heaven's most powerful angels. Chapter 72, verse 1 introduces this divine teacher. The book of the courses of the luminaries of the heaven, the relations of each, according to their classes, their dominion, and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which Uriel, the holy angel, who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. This wasn't just any angel. This was Uriel, whose very name means fire of God, and he was about to reveal secrets that had been hidden since creation. Uriel didn't approach this teaching casually. He understood that the knowledge he was about to share would affect every aspect of human life on Earth. The movements of the sun, moon, and stars weren't random events happening in the sky. They were part of a precise, divine system that governed time itself. Each heavenly body had been assigned its specific path, its exact timing, and its particular purpose. As Uriel began his instruction, Enoch realized he was receiving the owner's manual for creation itself. Chapter 72, verse 2 reveals the scope of this knowledge. And first there goes forth the great luminary, named the sun, and his circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and he is quite filled with illuminating and heating fire. The sun wasn't just a ball of fire floating in space, it was a carefully designed instrument of God's perfect timing system. Uriel explained that every movement in the heavens was connected to God's plan for Earth. The rising and setting of the sun determined when humans should work and rest. The phases of the moon marked the passage of months. The positions of the stars indicated the changing seasons. Nothing in the sky was accidental. Everything was part of an intricate system designed by divine wisdom. The angel made it clear that understanding these movements wasn't optional for those who wanted to live in harmony with God's will. Chapter 74, verse 12, emphasizes the importance. And all the days of their dominion, their seasons, and their years, and all the days of their years, and their months and their weeks, and all their Sabbaths. Time itself was sacred, and those who ignored God's calendar would find themselves out of step with heaven's rhythm. Uriel's teaching wasn't dry astronomy or complicated mathematics. It was a revelation of how God had woven his purposes into the very fabric of time and space. Every sunrise was a reminder of God's faithfulness. Every sunset was an invitation to rest in his provision. Every star was a witness to his eternal nature. Uriel's most revolutionary teaching challenged everything people thought they knew about measuring time. Chapter 72, verse 32 reveals God's true calendar. And on that day, the night decreases and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. And the night is equal to the day, and the year is exactly as to its days 364. This wasn't a human invention or arbitrary choice. This was the calendar that God himself had built into creation. The angel explained that this 364-day year was perfect because it divided evenly into weeks. 52 weeks of 7 days each gave exactly 364 days, which meant that every year began and ended on the same day of the week. This created a rhythm that allowed the sacred festivals and holy days to fall on their appointed days year after year without confusion. But Uriel warned that humans had begun following a different system. Chapter 74, verse 10 describes the problem. And many chiefs of the heads of thousands, who are placed over the whole creation and over all the stars, have also to do with the 4 intercalary days, being inseparable from their office according to the reckoning of the year. And these render service on the 4 days which are not reckoned in the reckoning of the year. People were adding extra days that God had never intended, trying to make the calendar match the moon's cycles instead of the sun's perfect pattern. This lunar calendar seemed logical to human minds, because the moon's phases were easy to observe. But Uriel revealed that following the moon's irregular cycle would lead people further and further away from God's intended timing. Chapter 75, verse 2 explains the danger. And when they take one day, their course will be according to this calculation, and they will not delay it at all. And they will add month to month according to the number of days. The lunar calendar would gradually drift away from the true seasons, causing confusion and error. The consequences weren't just about keeping accurate time. Chapter 80, verse 2 reveals what was at stake. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed. And these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. When humans followed false calendars, they were actually participating in the same rebellion that had corrupted the fallen angels. They were choosing human wisdom over divine instruction. Uriel's solar calendar wasn't just more accurate. It was a reflection of God's own nature. Just as God never changes, His calendar provided stability and consistency. Just as God is faithful to His promises, His calendar ensured that His appointed times would always arrive exactly when expected. Following God's calendar was an act of faith and obedience. The angel made it clear that this wasn't a matter of personal preference or cultural tradition. Chapter 82, verse 7 declares the importance. And now, my son, I have shown thee everything, and the law of all the stars of the heaven is completed. God had established His calendar as a law, and following any other system was rebellion against heaven itself. Uriel's next revelation opened Enoch's eyes to the magnificent architecture of heaven itself. Chapter 72, verse 3 describes the divine design. And the sun goes forth from the first portal in the east and enters the sixth portal, and rises for 30 days. The sun didn't wander randomly across the sky. It followed precise pathways through 12 specific gates that God had built into the dome of heaven. These gates weren't symbolic or metaphorical. They were actual openings in the heavenly realm through which the sun passed on its daily journey. Chapter 72, verse 6 explains the eastern gates. 3 portals of heaven open in the east, through which the sun rises, and 3 in the west, through which it sets. 6 gates faced east, where the sun would rise, and 6 gates faced west, where it would set, creating a perfect system for the sun's daily travel. Each gate corresponded to specific times of the year and controlled how much daylight the earth would receive. When the sun emerged from the first eastern gate, it created the shortest day of winter. As it moved through the second and third gates, the days gradually became longer. Chapter 72, verse 8 describes this progression. When the sun rises in the heaven, he comes forth through that fourth portal 30 days, and rises properly, and all the day is equal to the night, and comes to constitute 14 parts of light to the day. The spring equinox happened when the sun used the fourth gate, creating equal day and night. The summer solstice occurred when the sun reached the sixth and highest gate. Chapter 72, verse 9 reveals this peak. And the sun goes forth from that sixth portal in the east, and sets in the sixth portal in the west, and all the day is long and the night short. This was the longest day of the year, when the sun traveled its highest path across the sky. As the year progressed, the sun would reverse its journey, moving back through the gates toward winter. Each transition was precisely timed, each movement perfectly calculated. Chapter 72, verse 13 describes the autumn balance. On that day, the day and night are equal, and they become of equal length, and the night amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. The fall equinox marked another moment of perfect balance. Uriel emphasized that these gates weren't just mechanical devices. They were expressions of God's wisdom and power. The same God who had created the gates also controlled when the sun would pass through each one. The same divine mind that had designed this system also determined its exact timing. Chapter 72, verse 37 confirms this divine control. And the sun goes forth according to this law, and sets according to this law, and returns again, and rises in the east according to this law. The 12 gates revealed that God's creation wasn't chaotic or unpredictable. Instead, it operated according to laws and patterns that demonstrated His perfect wisdom. Every sunrise and sunset, every change of season, every variation in daylight hours was the result of the sun following God's predetermined path through these heavenly gates. After revealing the sun's perfect system, Uriel turned his attention to the moon's more complex journey. Chapter 73, verse 1, introduces this celestial wonder. And after this law, I saw another law dealing with a smaller luminary, which is named the moon. The moon's path was different from the sun's, more intricate, more varied, but equally precise in its divine design. Unlike the sun, which followed the same basic pattern every day, the moon had multiple cycles happening simultaneously. Chapter 73, verse 4 describes one aspect. On the first day, she is called the new moon, for on that day the light rises upon her. She becomes full moon exactly on the day when the sun sets in the west, and from the east she rises at night. And the moon shines the whole night through until the sun rises in the east. The moon's phases followed a precise schedule that coordinated perfectly with the sun's movements. Uriel explained that the moon had its own set of gates to travel through, but these were arranged differently than the sun's gates. Chapter 73, verse 5 reveals the pattern. And the moon sets in the west and returns to the east and appears again in her place and on her day, and becomes full moon according to this calculation. The moon's monthly journey took it through all 12 gates, but in a way that created the familiar cycle of new moon, waxing, full moon, and waning. The complexity of the moon's system amazed Enoch. Chapter 78, verse 6 describes part of this intricate design. And when the moon rises, 1/14th part appears of her light in the heaven, and she becomes full in her light on the 14th day. Every phase of the moon was calculated with mathematical precision. The amount of light visible each night wasn't random. It followed exact proportions that had been determined before creation. Uriel revealed that the moon's light wasn't independent. It was a reflection of the sun's glory. Chapter 78, verse 3 explains this relationship. And the light of the moon depends upon the sun, and is really not her own, but the light of the sun that shines upon her. This wasn't just astronomy. It was theology. The moon's role was to reflect the greater light, just as humans were meant to reflect God's glory. The moon's cycles also served as a calendar system, but Uriel warned that it was subordinate to the sun's calendar. Chapter 78, verse 10 makes this hierarchy clear. And in the days when she is eclipsed, owing to the brightness of the sun, in the moon are there certain periods, and she does not appear for 6 days. Sometimes the moon would be hidden by the sun's greater glory, reminding observers that the sun was the primary timekeeper. The angel emphasized that understanding the moon's patterns was important for recognizing God's festivals and appointed times. Chapter 78, verse 17 reveals this purpose. And the names of the sun and moon shall be blotted out of the heaven, the sun and the moon and the stars, and all the luminaries of heaven. The moon served as a witness to God's timing, marking the passage of months and helping people prepare for sacred occasions. Beyond the sun and moon, Uriel revealed an entire network of celestial bodies that worked together in perfect harmony. Chapter 75, verse 3, introduces this stellar system, and the leaders of the heads of the thousands, who are placed over the whole creation and over all the stars, have also to do with the 4 intercalary days. Every star in the sky had been assigned a specific role and appointed time to fulfill its divine purpose. The stars weren't scattered randomly across the heavens. They were organized into precise groups and patterns. Chapter 75, verse 8 describes their organization. And their leaders have charge over all the years and over all the seasons according to their appearance, and they lead them and calculate them. Some stars were designated as leaders over others, creating a hierarchy that ensured perfect coordination throughout the heavens. Uriel explained that different stars had authority over different seasons of the year. Chapter 82, verse 4 reveals this seasonal assignment. In the first portal in the east, there are 12 windows, from whence proceed a flame when they are opened in their season. The stars that appeared in spring brought influences different from those that ruled in summer, fall, or winter. Each season had its own stellar guardians. These stars also served as heavenly timekeepers, helping to mark the passage of years and ages. Chapter 80, verse 6 describes their timing function. And the moon shall alter her order, and not appear at her time. And in those days the sun shall be seen, and it shall journey in the evening on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly than accords with the order of light. The stars provided reference points for measuring long periods of time, but the stars did more than just mark time. They influenced conditions on earth. Chapter 76, verse 14 explains their earthly impact. And all the winds serve them and complete all their courses, and the earth rejoices, and the trees and all plants that are on it flourish. The stars work together with the winds and weather patterns to create the conditions necessary for life on earth. Uriel warned that in the last days, some stars would abandon their appointed courses. Chapter 80, verse 7 describes this future rebellion. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed, and these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. This stellar rebellion would be a sign that the end times were approaching and that God's judgment was near. The angel emphasized that every star had been given its position and purpose by divine decree. Chapter 82, verse 10 confirms this divine appointment. For the luminaries shall change their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. And the whole order of the stars shall be concealed from the sinners. Those who rebelled against God would lose the ability to read the signs in the heavens, while the righteous would continue to understand God's timing through the faithful stars. Uriel's teaching expanded beyond the heavenly bodies to include the forces that moved across the earth itself. Chapter 76, verse 1 introduces these invisible powers. The names of the winds. One is called the east wind, one the south, one the west, one the north. These weren't just weather patterns. They were spiritual forces that carried out God's will across the entire planet. Each wind had its own character and purpose in God's design. Chapter 76, verse 3 describes the east wind. And the first wind from those portals, called the east wind, comes forth through the first portal which is in the east, inclining towards the south. From it come forth desolation, drought, heat, and destruction. The east wind brought the hot, dry conditions that could either bless or judge, depending on God's purposes. The south wind carried different influences entirely. Chapter 76, verse 4 reveals its nature. And through the second portal in the middle comes what is fitting, and from it there come rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. And through the third portal which lies toward the north come cold and drought. The south wind was generally beneficial, bringing the moisture and warmth needed for crops to grow. From the west came the winds that brought dramatic changes. Chapter 76, verse 5 describes their power. And after these, the west winds, through the fourth portal, which is toward the west, come forth for scattering clouds and rain, and storm and tempest and every plague. The western winds were associated with storms and dramatic weather changes that could reshape the landscape. The north winds completed the system with their own unique characteristics. Chapter 76, verse 6 reveals their effects. And after these, the north winds. From the seventh portal in the east come dew and rain, locusts and desolation. The northern winds could bring either blessing through rain and dew, or judgment through destructive forces like locusts. Uriel explained that these winds didn't operate independently. They worked together as part of God's cosmic system. Chapter 76, verse 13 describes their coordination. And through the fourth, they go forth for blessing and abundance on the earth. For the trees and for all living things flourish, and they open the chambers of blessing. When the winds worked in harmony, they created the perfect conditions for life to flourish on earth. The angel revealed that understanding the winds was crucial for recognizing God's timing and purposes. Chapter 77, verse 3 explains their significance. And all the winds serve and complete all their courses, and the earth rejoices, and the trees and all plants that are on it flourish. The winds were servants of the Most High, carrying out His commands and fulfilling His purposes across the earth. As Uriel's teaching neared its climax, he revealed how all these celestial elements work together in perfect unity. Chapter 79, verse 1 describes this cosmic symphony. In the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields, and all things on the earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time. When everything functioned according to God's design, the entire universe operated like a perfectly calibrated timepiece. The sun, moon, stars, and winds weren't separate systems competing with each other. They were parts of one magnificent whole. Chapter 79, verse 2 reveals their cooperation. And the rain shall be kept back, and the heavens shall withhold it. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backward, and shall not grow in their time, and the fruits of the trees shall be withheld in their time. Each element depended on the others, and when one part was out of alignment, the entire system suffered. Uriel explained that this harmony extended beyond just keeping accurate time. Chapter 80, verse 1 describes the broader implications. And in the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields, and all things on the earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time. When humans lived in harmony with God's calendar, all of creation responded with blessing and fruitfulness. The angel revealed that this cosmic timepiece was so precise that it could predict events far into the future. Chapter 81, verse 1 shows this prophetic dimension. And he said unto me, Observe, Enoch, these heavenly tablets, and read what is written thereon, and mark every individual fact. The movements of the heavenly bodies contained information about God's plans for history. This perfect timing system also revealed God's character to those who studied it carefully. Chapter 81, verse 2 explains this revelation. And I observed the heavenly tablets, and read everything which was written thereon, and understood everything, and read the book of all the deeds of mankind, and of all the children of men who shall be upon the earth to the remotest generations. God's faithfulness in maintaining cosmic order demonstrated His trustworthiness in all areas of life. The harmony of the cosmic timepiece served as a standard for human behavior. Chapter 82, verse 2 makes this connection. And now, my son Methuselah, all these things I am recounting to thee and writing down for thee, and I have revealed to thee everything, and given thee books concerning all these. Just as the heavenly bodies faithfully fulfilled their appointed roles, humans were called to fulfill their roles in God's plan with equal faithfulness. Uriel emphasized that this cosmic harmony wasn't automatic. It required constant divine maintenance. Chapter 82, verse 3 reveals God's active involvement. So preserve, my son Methuselah, the books from thy father's hand, and see that thou deliver them to the generations of the world. God personally ensured that every element of his cosmic timepiece continued to function according to his perfect will. Uriel's final warning revealed the serious consequences of abandoning God's perfect calendar system. Chapter 80, verse 2 describes what happens when people follow human wisdom instead of divine instruction. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed, and these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. Rejecting God's calendar wasn't just a minor error. It was participation in cosmic rebellion. The immediate consequence was confusion about when to observe God's appointed festivals and holy days. Chapter 80, verse 3 explains the problem. And the whole order of the stars shall be concealed from the sinners, and the thoughts of those on the earth shall err concerning them, and they shall be altered from all their ways. People would lose their ability to recognize God's timing, missing the very appointments he had established for blessing and relationship. This timing confusion would spread beyond religious observances to affect every aspect of life. Chapter 80, verse 4 describes the broader impact. Yea, they shall err and take them to be gods, and evil shall be multiplied upon them, and punishment shall come upon them so as to destroy all. When people couldn't recognize God's timing, they would begin worshiping created things instead of the Creator. The agricultural consequences would be severe and immediate. Chapter 80, verse 5 reveals the earthly effects. And the years shall be shortened, and the increase shall be destroyed, and all things on the earth shall be altered. Crops would fail to grow properly, harvests would come at wrong times, and the natural rhythm of planting and harvesting would be disrupted. Even the weather patterns would become chaotic when divine timing was abandoned. Chapter 80, verse 6 describes the meteorological chaos. And all the children of the earth shall thereby know that their redemption hath not yet come, and seasons of the year shall be changed. Rain would fall at wrong times, droughts would come unexpectedly, and the reliable patterns that farmers depended on would become unpredictable. The spiritual consequences were even more serious than the physical ones. Chapter 80, verse 7 warns of the final result. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed, and these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. People would lose their connection to God's rhythm of life, wandering in spiritual darkness without the guidance that proper timing provided. Uriel's warning made it clear that following false calendars was ultimately a choice between trusting God or trusting human wisdom. Chapter 82, verse 4 emphasizes the importance of this choice. And I know this mystery, and have read the heavenly tablets, and have seen the holy books, and have found written therein and inscribed regarding them. Those who chose to follow God's calendar would remain connected to heaven's rhythm, while those who followed human calendars would drift further and further from divine truth. Enoch's journey into the realm of prophetic dreams began with a vision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Chapter 83, verse 3 describes the moment when this terrible revelation came to him. And I saw in a vision how the heaven collapsed and was borne off and fell to the earth. This wasn't just any dream. It was a divine warning about destruction so complete that it would reshape the entire world. In this first dream, Enoch watched as the very foundations of creation began to crumble. The sky itself, which had always seemed so solid and permanent, started falling toward the earth like a giant tent collapsing. Chapter 83, verse 4 continues the terrifying vision. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss, and mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were rent from their stems, and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. Nothing would survive this coming catastrophe. The dream revealed that this destruction wouldn't be random or accidental. It was divine judgment for the corruption that had spread across the earth. Enoch saw water rising from beneath the ground, rain pouring from above, and floods covering every mountain and hill. Chapter 83, verse 5, describes his reaction to this vision. And thereupon a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up my voice to cry aloud, and said, "The earth is destroyed." The magnitude of the coming flood overwhelmed him with grief and terror. When Enoch woke from this dream, he was deeply troubled. He understood that what he had seen wasn't just a nightmare. It was a prophecy of coming judgment. Chapter 83, verse 7 reveals his immediate response. And I cried with a loud voice, with the spirit of power, and blessed the Lord of righteousness, and exalted him. Even in the face of such terrible destruction, Enoch recognized that God's judgment was righteous and necessary. The dream showed Enoch that the flood wouldn't be the end of everything, but rather a cleansing that would prepare the way for something new. Chapter 83, verse 8, hints at hope beyond the destruction. And my grandfather Methuselah woke me as I lay asleep, and said unto me, What is it thou hast seen? And wherefore dost thou cry and weep? Even in the midst of judgment, there would be those who survived to carry on God's purposes. This first dream established a pattern that would continue throughout Enoch's visions. God's judgment wasn't cruel or arbitrary. It was the necessary response to corruption that had become so complete that only total cleansing could restore righteousness. The flood would be terrible, but it would also be the first step toward redemption. The second part of Enoch's dream revealed that water wouldn't be the only instrument of divine judgment. Chapter 84, verse 3 describes an even more terrifying vision. And I saw in a vision how the heaven collapsed and was borne off and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss. But this time, the destruction came through fire rather than flood. Enoch watched as cosmic fire began consuming the very foundations of creation. This wasn't ordinary fire that burned wood or grass. This was divine fire that could destroy the spiritual realm itself. Chapter 84, verse 4 reveals the scope of this destruction. And I saw how a great sword was given to the sheep, and the sheep proceeded against all the beasts of the field to slay them, and all the beasts and the birds of the heaven fled from their presence. The fire would purge not just the earth, but the heavens themselves. The vision showed that this cosmic fire would come at the end of all things, when God's patience had finally reached its limit. Unlike the flood, which would preserve a remnant, this fire seemed to consume everything without exception. Chapter 84, verse 5 describes the totality of the destruction. And I saw till all their generations were transformed, and they all became white bulls, and the first among them became a lamb. And that lamb became a great animal, and had great black horns on its head. The fire would transform creation itself, burning away everything corrupt and leaving only purity. Enoch realized that this cosmic fire represented the final judgment, when God would settle all accounts and establish his kingdom forever. The fire wasn't just destructive, it was also purifying, separating the righteous from the wicked with perfect precision. Chapter 84, verse 6 shows the ultimate result. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced over it, and over all the oxen. What remained after the fire would bring joy to God himself. The dream revealed that this cosmic fire wouldn't come suddenly or without warning. There would be signs and preparations, opportunities for repentance and salvation. But when the appointed time arrived, nothing would be able to stop or slow the consuming fire of divine justice. This vision of cosmic fire served as the ultimate backdrop for all of human history. Every generation, every nation, every individual life was moving toward this final moment when the fire of God's holiness would consume everything that opposed his perfect will. Enoch's second major dream began with a completely different approach to revealing God's plan. Chapter 85, verse 3 introduces this symbolic vision. And I saw in a vision, and behold, there came forth from the earth a white bull, and after it came forth a heifer. And along with this latter came forth two beasts, one of which was black and the other red. This wasn't abstract prophecy. It was human history told through the symbols of animals that even a child could understand. The white bull represented the first man, Adam, in all his original purity and glory. The color white symbolized the innocence and righteousness that had characterized humanity before the fall. Chapter 85, verse 4 continues the vision. And that black beast gored the red one and pursued it over the earth. And thereupon I could no longer see that red beast. The black beast was Cain, and the red one was Abel, showing how sin had entered the world through the first murder. This animal symbolism made the complex story of human history accessible and memorable. Instead of getting lost in names and dates, Enoch could see the essential character of each person and nation through their animal representation. The choice of animals wasn't random. Each creature's natural characteristics reflected the spiritual nature of the people they represented. The white bull Adam lived in perfect harmony with God and creation. Chapter 85, verse 5 describes what happened next. And those two beasts were born on the earth, and one of them was white, and the other was black. And the white one was begotten by the former, and was given to those waters. And the black one came up after the white one had disappeared, and stood in its place. The white represented Seth, who carried on the righteous line, while the black represented the lineage that would lead to further corruption. Through this symbolic vision, Enoch could see how the seeds of both righteousness and wickedness had been present from the very beginning of human history. The white bull Adam contained within himself the potential for both salvation and destruction, depending on the choices his descendants would make. The dream revealed that God's plan had always included both judgment and redemption. Even as corruption spread through the black beasts, the white ones continued to appear, carrying forward the promise of eventual restoration. The animal symbols made it clear that the struggle between good and evil wasn't just external. It was written into the very nature of human existence. As Enoch's animal dream continued, he witnessed the tragic multiplication of corruption that would eventually lead to divine judgment. Chapter 86, verse 1 describes the next phase of the vision. And again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above. And behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose and ate and pastured amongst those oxen. The falling star represented one of the fallen angels, and its mixing with the cattle showed how the heavenly rebellion had contaminated the human race. The vision made it clear that this corruption wasn't gradual or accidental. It was systematic and intentional. Chapter 86, verse 2 reveals the scope of the infiltration. And after that I saw the large and the black oxen, and behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. The fallen angels, represented by the stars, were actively working to corrupt every aspect of human society. Enoch watched in horror as more stars fell from heaven and joined in the corruption of the earth. Chapter 86, verse 3 describes the expanding rebellion. And again I saw in the vision, and looked towards the heaven, and behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to that first star. And they became bulls amongst those cattle and pastured with them. What had started with one fallen angel quickly became a coordinated rebellion involving hundreds of heavenly beings. The result of this heavenly invasion was the birth of creatures that had never been intended to exist. Chapter 86, verse 4 reveals the monstrous offspring. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, they all let out their privy members like horses, and began to cry aloud like jackals, and to devour those cattle. These weren't normal animals. They were giants and monsters whose very existence violated the natural order. The corruption spread rapidly throughout the earth as these hybrid creatures multiplied and grew in power. Chapter 86, verse 5 describes the escalating violence. And I saw that they forsook their house and their star, and gave themselves over to those cattle, and pastured amongst them, and followed them. Even the fallen angels abandoned their heavenly nature completely, becoming more beast-like than the animals they corrupted. The dream showed that this corruption wasn't just physical, it was spiritual and moral as well. The mixing of heavenly and earthly natures produced beings that combined the worst characteristics of both realms. They had the supernatural power of angels, but the selfish desires of corrupted flesh. As the vision progressed, Enoch saw that the entire earth became filled with violence and chaos. The natural harmony that God had established in creation was completely destroyed, replaced by a world where might made right and the strong preyed mercilessly upon the weak. The most detailed part of Enoch's dream focused on the history of God's chosen people, told through an intricate system of animal symbols. Chapter 89, verse 1 introduces this section. And one of those four went to that white bull and instructed him in a secret, without his being terrified. From a bull he became a man, and built for himself a large vessel and dwelt thereon. The white bull was Noah, and his transformation into a man marked his special calling to preserve life through the flood. After the flood, the animal symbolism became more complex as it traced the development of the nation of Israel. Chapter 89, verse 10 describes the next phase. And I saw till a white bull was born, with large horns, and all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air feared him and made petition to him all the time. This white bull with large horns represented Abraham, whose descendants would become a mighty nation. The dream followed Israel's journey through slavery and liberation, using different animals to represent different peoples and nations. Chapter 89, verse 13 reveals the Egyptian bondage. And I saw till the sheep went to those white sheep and began to beget many sheep. And those white sheep began to multiply exceedingly. The sheep represented the Israelites, while their oppressors were shown as wolves and other predatory animals. Moses appeared in the vision as a special sheep with unique characteristics. Chapter 89, verse 36 describes his role. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep came unto them, and took in his hand the staff of him that led them, and went down, and came, and saw them, and called to that sheep which had fled from the wolves, and spoke with it concerning the wolves, that it should warn them not to touch the sheep. Moses was the sheep who could speak directly with the Lord of the sheep, and lead his people to safety. The conquest of the promised land was shown through battles between different animals. Chapter 89, verse 55, describes these conflicts. "And I saw that man, who wrote the book according to the command of the Lord, and he opened that book concerning the destruction which those 12 last shepherds had wrought, and showed that they had destroyed much more than their predecessors. The various Canaanite nations were represented by different wild beasts that the sheep had to drive out of their new homeland. The period of the judges and kings was depicted through the rise and fall of different animals within the sheep community." Chapter 89, verse 41 shows this development. "And I saw till horns grew upon those lambs, and the raven cast down their horns. And I saw till there sprouted a great horn of one of those sheep, and their eyes were opened." Some sheep grew horns, representing their power and authority, while others remained simple sheep, showing the division between leaders and followers. The dream revealed that throughout this entire history, there was an underlying pattern of faithfulness and rebellion, blessing and judgment, that would continue until the final intervention of the Lord of the sheep himself. The climax of the animal apocalypse came with the appearance of a figure unlike any other in the entire vision. Chapter 90, verse 9 describes this momentous event. "And I saw till a great horn sprouted on one of those sheep, and their eyes were opened. And it looked at them, and their eyes opened, and it cried to the sheep. And the rams saw it, and all ran to it." This wasn't just another leader or prophet. This was the promised one who would transform everything. The horned white lamb possessed characteristics that set it apart from every other animal in the dream. Chapter 90, verse 10, reveals its unique nature. "And notwithstanding all this, those eagles and vultures and ravens and kites still kept tearing the sheep and swooping down upon them and devouring them. Still the sheep remained silent, but the rams lamented and cried out. While other sheep suffered under oppression, this lamb had the power to change their circumstances completely. What made this lamb so special wasn't just its horn, but its ability to open the eyes of other sheep." Chapter 90, verse 11 describes this transformative power. "And those ravens fought and battled with it, and sought to lay low its horn, and they had no power over it. And I saw till the shepherds and eagles, and those vultures and kites came, and they cried to the ravens that they should break the horn of that ram." The enemies of the sheep recognized that this lamb posed a threat to their dominance and sought to destroy it. The vision revealed that this horned lamb wouldn't work alone. It would gather followers who would share in its mission. Chapter 90, verse 12 shows the beginning of this movement. "But it battled with them and cried that its help might come to it. And I saw till that man, who wrote down the names of the shepherds and carried up into the presence of the Lord of the sheep, came and helped it and showed it everything. The lamb would receive divine assistance and revelation for its work. The horned white lamb represented hope for all the oppressed sheep who had suffered under corrupt leadership for generations. Chapter 90, verse 13 describes the impact of its appearance. "And I saw till the Lord of the sheep came unto them in wrath, and all who saw him fled. And they all fell into his shadow from before his face." The coming of the Lamb would trigger the final intervention of the Lord himself. This Lamb wasn't just another earthly leader who would eventually die and be replaced. Chapter 90, verse 30 hints at its eternal nature. "And I saw till a throne was erected in the pleasant land, and the Lord of the sheep sat upon it. And the other took the sealed books and opened the book before the Lord of the sheep." The horned lamb would participate in the final judgment and the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. The vision made it clear that everything in history had been leading up to the appearance of this special lamb. and that its coming would mark the beginning of the end of the age of corruption and oppression. The animal apocalypse reached its climax with a cosmic battle that would determine the fate of all creation. Chapter 90, verse 14 describes the beginning of this final conflict. "And I saw till that man came and wrote down the names of those shepherds, and carried up into the presence of the Lord of the sheep. And the Lord of the sheep came to them, and took the staff of him that led them, and went down from that place, and called them." This wasn't just another earthly war. It was the ultimate confrontation between the forces of good and evil. The battle involved not just the sheep and their immediate oppressors, but all the nations of the earth. Chapter 90, verse 16 reveals the scope of the conflict. "And I saw till those shepherds pastured in their season, and they began to slay and to destroy more than they were bidden. And they delivered those sheep into the hand of the lions." Every kingdom, every people group, every power structure on earth would be drawn into this final confrontation. The sheep themselves were transformed in preparation for this battle. Chapter 90, verse 17 describes their preparation. "And the lions and tigers ate and devoured the greater part of those sheep, and the boars ate along with them. And they burnt that tower and demolished that house." They were no longer helpless victims, but active participants in their own liberation, empowered by the horned lamb to fight back against their oppressors. The turning point came when divine intervention changed the nature of the battle itself. Chapter 90, verse 18 describes this crucial moment. "And I became exceedingly sorrowful over that tower, because that house of the sheep was demolished, and afterwards I was unable to see if those sheep entered that house." The Lord of the sheep personally entered the conflict, ensuring that justice would finally prevail. The battle revealed the true nature of the forces that had been oppressing God's people throughout history. Chapter 90, verse 19 shows their exposure. "And the winds and the eagles and the vultures and the ravens flew up and carried off those sheep and devoured them, while the wolves devoured them, until the Lord of the sheep raised up shepherds over them." The spiritual powers behind earthly oppression were finally revealed and defeated. The victory wasn't achieved through human strength or wisdom, but through divine power working through surrendered servants. Chapter 90, verse 20 describes the aftermath. "And those shepherds began to pasture them and to lead them astray and to destroy them. And the Lord of the sheep was wrathful exceedingly against those shepherds. And that man wrote down everything." The sheep learned that their true security lay not in earthly protectors, but in the Lord of the sheep himself. The final battle served as both judgment and liberation, destroying the systems of oppression while freeing the righteous to enter into the promises that had been prepared for them since the foundation of the world. The animal apocalypse concluded with a vision of restoration so complete that it transformed the entire created order. Chapter 90, verse 28 describes the beginning of this new era. "And I saw till the Lord of the sheep brought a new house greater and loftier than that first, and set it up in the place of the first, which had been folded up. All its pillars were new, and its ornaments were new and larger than those of the first." This wasn't just rebuilding what had been destroyed. It was creating something entirely new and better. In this new creation, the old divisions and conflicts between different animals completely disappeared. Chapter 90, verse 30 reveals the universal transformation. "And I saw till all those sheep which had been left were gathered into that house. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good and had returned to his house." Every creature found its proper place in God's restored order, and ancient enmities were replaced by perfect harmony. The vision showed that this new world wouldn't be limited to one people or nation. Chapter 90, verse 33 describes the universal scope. "And all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the heaven, assembled in that house. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good and had returned to his house. Representatives from every nation and people group would be included in the final restoration. The new creation was characterized by perfect justice and righteousness. Chapter 90, verse 34, shows the transformed nature of relationships. And I saw till those sheep became white, and their wool was abundant and clean, and all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the heaven, assembled in that house. The corruption that had plagued creation since the fall was completely removed, and everything reflected the purity of its original design. In this restored world, the Lord of the sheep would dwell directly among his people. Chapter 90, verse 35, describes this intimate fellowship. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good and had returned to his house. And I saw till they laid down that sword, which had been given to the sheep. And they brought it back into the house, and it was sealed before the presence of the Lord. There would be no more need for warfare or conflict, because perfect peace would reign throughout creation. The dream revealed that this new heaven and earth would be eternal and unchanging. Chapter 90, verse 36, confirms the permanence of this restoration. And all the sheep were invited into that house, but it did not hold them all. And the eyes of them all were opened, and they saw the good. And there was not one among them that did not see. Everyone who entered this new creation would have perfect spiritual sight and understanding. The animal apocalypse ended with the establishment of God's kingdom in its fullness, where every promise would be fulfilled and every hope realized in perfect harmony with divine will. As Enoch's extraordinary journey through visions and revelations neared its end, he felt the weight of responsibility to pass on what he had learned to future generations. Chapter 91, verse 1 reveals his heart as a father and teacher. And now, my son Methuselah, call to me all thy brothers, and gather together to me all the sons of thy mother. For the word calls me, and the Spirit is poured out upon me, that I may show you everything that shall befall you forever. This wasn't just ancient wisdom. It was urgent truth that would guide his family through the darkest times ahead. Enoch understood that his time on earth was drawing to a close, and he wanted to make sure his children and grandchildren would have the guidance they needed to stay faithful to God. Chapter 91, verse 3 shows his urgent concern. And now I tell you, my sons, and show you the paths of righteousness and the paths of violence. Yea, I will show you again, that ye may know what will come to pass. He had seen the future, both its terrors and its glories, and he knew his descendants would need clear direction to navigate what was coming. The aging patriarch gathered his family around him like a loving grandfather telling bedtime stories, except these stories were prophecies that would shape the destiny of nations. Chapter 91, verse 4, reveals his teaching method. And now, hearken unto me, my sons, and walk in the paths of righteousness, and walk not in the paths of violence. For all who walk in the paths of unrighteousness shall perish forever. Enoch didn't speak in complicated theological terms. He used simple language that even children could understand. His exhortations weren't harsh commands from a distant authority figure, but tender warnings from someone who genuinely cared about their welfare. Chapter 92, verse 1 demonstrates his pastoral heart. The book written by Enoch. Enoch indeed wrote this complete doctrine of wisdom, which is praised of all men and a judge of all the earth, for all my children who shall dwell on the earth. Every word was motivated by love and designed to protect those he cherished most. Enoch knew that his descendants would face choices between following God's ways and following the corrupt path that most of humanity had chosen. Chapter 94, verse 1, reveals his strategy for helping them choose wisely. "And now I say unto you, my sons, love righteousness and walk therein. For the paths of righteousness are worthy of acceptation, but the paths of unrighteousness shall suddenly be destroyed and vanish." He painted clear pictures of the consequences of different choices, helping them see the long-term results of their decisions. The wise teacher understood that young people learn best through stories and examples, rather than abstract principles. Throughout his final messages, Enoch would use vivid imagery, memorable comparisons, and practical illustrations to help his family understand both the rewards of faithfulness and the dangers of rebellion. His goal wasn't to frighten them into obedience, but to help them see the wisdom and beauty of choosing God's ways. In one of his most systematic prophecies, Enoch revealed how all of human history would unfold in 10 distinct periods that he called weeks. Chapter 93, verse 3 introduces this remarkable timeline. "And Enoch began to recount from the books and said, I was born the 7th in the first week, while judgment and righteousness still endured. Each week would last for many generations, and each would have its own character and purpose in God's ultimate plan. This wasn't random history unfolding without purpose. It was a carefully orchestrated drama where each act built toward the final climax." Chapter 93, verse 4 reveals the methodical nature of God's plan. "And after me, there shall arise in the 2nd week great wickedness, and deceit shall have sprung up. And in it there shall be the first end, and in it a man shall be saved. And after it is ended, unrighteousness shall grow up, and a law shall be made for the sinners." Every week would serve a specific function in preparing the world for its ultimate destiny. Enoch saw that these weeks weren't just about the passage of time. They were about the gradual working out of God's justice and mercy through human history. Chapter 93, verse 5, shows how each period would build on the previous one. "And after that, in the 3rd week, at its close, a man shall be elected as the plant of righteous judgment, and his posterity shall become the plant of righteousness forevermore." The pattern would be corruption followed by judgment, then a new beginning with fresh hope. The apocalypse of weeks revealed that God wasn't caught off guard by human rebellion or scrambling to fix problems as they arose. Instead, he had planned from the beginning how he would deal with every challenge and ultimately bring his purposes to completion. Chapter 93, verse 6 demonstrates this divine foresight. "And after that, in the 4th week, at its close, visions of the holy and righteous shall be seen, and a law for all generations, and an enclosure shall be made for them." Each week was designed to prepare the world for what would come next. This systematic approach to history meant that nothing was accidental or meaningless. Every triumph and tragedy, every rise and fall of nations, every individual choice for good or evil, was part of a larger story that would ultimately demonstrate God's wisdom and justice. Chapter 93, verse 7 shows how this would culminate. "And after that, in the 5th week, at its close, the house of glory and dominion shall be built forever." The weeks would lead inevitably to the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. Enoch's vision of the weeks provided hope for those living in dark times, showing them that their suffering had meaning and that justice would ultimately prevail. It also served as a warning to those who chose wickedness, demonstrating that their temporary success would eventually give way to judgment and punishment. The first 7 weeks of history would cover the period from creation until the establishment of God's house on earth. Chapter 93, verse 4 begins this historical survey. "And after me there shall arise in the second week great wickedness, and deceit shall have sprung up, and in it there shall be the first end, and in it a man shall be saved. The second week would culminate in the great flood, when Noah and his family would be preserved while the rest of humanity faced judgment for their corruption. The third week would mark a new beginning for the human race. Chapter 93, verse 5, describes this fresh start. And after that, in the third week at its close, a man shall be elected as the plant of righteous judgment, and his posterity shall become the plant of righteousness forevermore. This was Abraham, whose descendants would carry God's promises forward through all the remaining weeks of history. His calling would establish the foundation for everything that followed. During the fourth week, God's people would receive special guidance and protection. Chapter 93, verse 6, reveals what would happen. And after that, in the fourth week, at its close, visions of the holy and righteous shall be seen, and a law for all generations, and an enclosure shall be made for them. This period would include the giving of the law through Moses and the establishment of Israel as a distinct nation with its own land and customs. The fifth week would see the construction of the most important building in human history. Chapter 93, verse 7 describes this achievement. And after that, in the fifth week, at its close, the house of glory and dominion shall be built forever. This was Solomon's temple, the place where God would dwell among his people and where the nations would come to worship. The temple represented the culmination of centuries of preparation and promise. The sixth week would bring both triumph and tragedy for God's people. Chapter 93, verse 8 reveals the mixed nature of this period. And after that, in the sixth week, all who live in it shall be blinded, and the hearts of all of them shall godlessly forsake wisdom. And in it a man shall ascend, and at its close the house of dominion shall be burnt with fire, and the whole race of the chosen root shall be dispersed. Despite having the temple and the law, the people would turn away from God, leading to exile and the destruction of the very house they had built for his glory. The seventh week would be characterized by widespread corruption and apostasy. Chapter 93, verse 9 describes this dark time. And after that, in the seventh week, shall an apostate generation arise, and many shall be its deeds, and all its deeds shall be apostate. This would be a time when evil would seem to triumph and righteousness would be rare. But it would also be the time when God would prepare for his ultimate intervention. These first 7 weeks would demonstrate the pattern that would characterize all of human history. God's faithfulness in the face of human unfaithfulness, his mercy extending through generation after generation despite repeated rebellion, and his commitment to fulfilling his promises no matter how dark things might become. The 8th week would mark a dramatic turning point in human history when God would finally intervene to establish justice on earth. Chapter 93, verse 10 describes this transformative period. And after that there shall be another, the 8th week, that of righteousness, and a sword shall be given to it, that a righteous judgment may be executed on the oppressors, and sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. This wouldn't be gradual reform or political change. It would be divine intervention that would completely overturn the existing order. The sword given to the righteous wouldn't be an ordinary weapon of war, but a divine instrument of justice that would separate good from evil with perfect precision. Chapter 91, verse 11 reveals the scope of this judgment. And after that there shall be another, the 8th week, that of righteousness, and a sword shall be given to it, that a righteous judgment may be executed on the oppressors, and sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. Those who had oppressed God's people throughout history would finally face the consequences of their actions. This week would see the righteous elevated to positions of authority they had never held before. For generations, the wicked had ruled over the good, using their power to exploit and harm those who tried to live according to God's ways. But in the 8th week, this situation would be completely reversed. Chapter 91, verse 12 shows the result. And at its close, they shall acquire houses through their righteousness, and a house shall be built for the great King in glory forevermore. The righteous would not only receive justice, but would also inherit the material blessings that had been stolen from them. The judgment of the 8th week wouldn't be arbitrary or cruel. It would be perfectly just, giving everyone exactly what their deeds had earned. Chapter 96, verse 1 explains the principle behind this judgment. I swear unto you that in heaven the angels record your goodness before the glory of the Great One, and your names are written before the glory of the Great One. Every act of righteousness had been recorded and would be rewarded, just as every act of wickedness had been noted and would be punished. The sword of judgment would also serve a purifying function, removing corruption that had poisoned human society for centuries. Chapter 98, verse 10, describes this cleansing. And now I know this mystery, that judgment shall overtake and befall the sinners, and they shall be rooted out from off the earth and destroyed from under the heavens forever. The 8th week would prepare the earth for the righteousness that would characterize the remaining weeks. This period would demonstrate that God's patience with evil wasn't infinite, and that there would come a time when justice would finally be served. The 8th week would vindicate everyone who had suffered for righteousness' sake, and would establish the foundation for the eternal kingdom that would follow. The 9th week would complete the work of purification that began in the 8th week, creating a world where righteousness would flourish without the interference of evil. Chapter 91, verse 14 describes this remarkable transformation. And after that, in the 9th week, the righteous judgment shall be revealed to the whole world, and all the deeds of the godless shall vanish from all the earth, and the world shall be written down for destruction, and all mankind shall look to the path of uprightness. This wouldn't just be the defeat of evil, it would be its complete elimination from creation. The revelation of righteous judgment wouldn't be hidden or limited to a few people. It would be visible to every person on earth. Chapter 91, verse 15 continues the description. And after this, on the 10th day of the 7th month of this week, there shall be an eternal judgment executed upon the watchers, and a great eternal heaven shall appear in the midst of the angels. The entire world would witness God's justice in action, leaving no doubt about his power and righteousness. During this week, the very foundations of society would be rebuilt according to God's design. Chapter 104, verse 2 reveals the scope of this transformation. And now I swear unto you, ye righteous, by the glory of the Great One, and by the glory of his kingdom. And I swear by my greatness that I understand this mystery. I have read the heavenly tablets, and have seen the holy books, and have found written therein and inscribed regarding them. The new society wouldn't be based on human wisdom or political theory, but on divine blueprints that had been prepared from the foundation of the world. The 9th week would see the fulfillment of every promise God had made to the righteous throughout history. Chapter 104, verse 3 describes their vindication, that all goodness and joy and glory are prepared for them and written down for the spirits of those who have died in righteousness, and that manifold good shall be given to you in recompense for your labors, and that your lot is abundantly beyond the lot of the living. Every sacrifice, every moment of suffering, every act of faithfulness would be rewarded beyond imagination. The banishment of wickedness wouldn't just be external, it would transform the hearts of those who remained. Chapter 96, verse 3 shows this inner change. And be hopeful. For aforetime you were put to shame through ill and affliction. But now ye shall shine as the lights of heaven. Ye shall shine, and ye shall be seen, and the portals of heaven shall be opened to you. The righteous would be transformed into beings of light, reflecting God's glory without any mixture of corruption. This week would demonstrate that God's ultimate purpose wasn't just to punish evil, but to create a world where good could flourish without interference. The 9th week would be the bridge between the old creation, marked by struggle, and the new creation, characterized by perfect peace. The 10th and final week would bring the complete resolution of the cosmic rebellion that had plagued creation since the beginning. Chapter 91, verse 15, reveals the climactic judgment. And after this, on the 10th day of the 7th month of this week, there shall be an eternal judgment executed upon the watchers, and a great eternal heaven shall appear in the midst of the angels. The fallen angels who had corrupted the earth would finally face their ultimate punishment, ending their influence forever. This judgment wouldn't be temporary or reversible. It would be eternal and final. Chapter 22, verse 4, describes the finality of their fate. Then Raguel, one of the holy angels, took vengeance on the world of the luminaries. The Watchers had been bound since their initial rebellion, but in the 10th week, they would face their final sentencing and eternal punishment. Their chapter in the story of creation would finally close. The 10th week would also see the completion of God's plan for the heavens themselves. Chapter 91, verse 16 continues the description. And the first heaven shall depart and pass away, and a new heaven shall appear, and all the powers of the heavens shall give sevenfold light. The very structure of creation would be renewed and perfected, providing a fitting setting for the eternal kingdom that would follow. During this final week, every question about justice would be answered, and every wrong would be made right. Chapter 103, verse 3 reveals the comprehensive nature of this resolution. And your names shall be written before the glory of the Great One unto all. The generations of the world, and your deeds shall not be forgotten before the Great One. Every act of righteousness, no matter how small or unnoticed, would be remembered and rewarded. Every act of wickedness, no matter how hidden or excused, would be exposed and punished. The judgment of the Watchers would serve as the final demonstration of God's absolute sovereignty over all creation. Chapter 91, verse 17, shows the ultimate result. And after that, there will be many weeks without number forever, and all shall be in goodness and righteousness, and sin shall no more be mentioned forever. With the source of cosmic rebellion finally eliminated, creation could enter into the eternal peace and righteousness that God had always intended. The 10th week would mark not just the end of the old creation, but the beginning of eternity itself. Time, as humans had experienced it, would give way to the timeless existence of God's eternal kingdom, where every promise would be fulfilled and every hope realized. Beyond the 10 weeks of history lay an eternal future that would surpass every earthly hope and dream. Chapter 91, verse 16 describes the beginning of this new reality. And the first heaven shall depart and pass away, and a new heaven shall appear, and all the powers of the heavens shall give sevenfold light. This wouldn't be a repair or renovation of the old creation. It would be something entirely new and infinitely better. The new heavens would be characterized by light that was 7 times brighter than anything the old creation had known. Chapter 1, 104 verse 2 reveals what this would mean for the righteous. And now I swear unto you, ye righteous, by the glory of the Great One, and by the glory of his kingdom, and I swear by my greatness, that I understand this mystery. The increased light wouldn't just be physical illumination. It would represent the complete revelation of God's glory and truth throughout all creation. In these new heavens, righteousness wouldn't be a struggle or an achievement. It would be the natural state of existence. Chapter 91, verse 17 promises this transformation. And after that, there will be many weeks without number forever, and all shall be in goodness and righteousness, and sin shall no more be mentioned forever. The very possibility of evil would be eliminated, not through force or restriction, but through the complete transformation of creation itself. The righteous who entered this new reality would be transformed to match their environment. Chapter 104, verse 4 describes their changed nature. And your righteousness shall not be in vain, but it shall be for gladness and great joy, and shall be for a righteous heritage to the children of the world forevermore. They would no longer struggle against sin or face temptation. Their righteousness would be perfect and permanent. The new heavens would be a place of infinite exploration and discovery. Chapter 93, verse 10, hints at the endless nature of this existence. For the elect there shall be light and grace and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. There would always be new aspects of God's character to discover, new dimensions of his creation to explore, new depths of fellowship to experience. This eternal realm wouldn't be static or boring. It would be dynamic and growing, with ever-increasing joy and wonder. Chapter 1, 108, verse 11 reveals the expanding nature of this blessing. And now I will summon the spirits of the good, who belong to the generation of light, and I will transform those who were born in darkness, who in the flesh were not recompensed with such honor as their faithfulness deserved. The righteous would continue to grow in glory and understanding throughout eternity. Enoch's final words contained both the ultimate promise for the faithful and the ultimate warning for the rebellious. Chapter 104, verse 1 reveals his heart as he concluded his message. I swear unto you that in heaven the angels record your goodness before the glory of the Great One, and your names are written before the glory of the Great One. Every act of faithfulness, every moment of suffering for righteousness, every choice to follow God despite opposition had been carefully recorded and would be abundantly rewarded. The blessing promised to the righteous went far beyond anything they could imagine or deserve. Chapter 104, verse 6 describes the scope of their reward. And ye shall shine as the lights of heaven, and ye shall be seen, and the portals of heaven shall be opened to you, and your cry shall be heard, and your joy shall be as the angels of heaven. They would not only enter heaven, they would become like the angels themselves, sharing in the glory and joy that characterized heaven's inhabitants. But for those who had chosen wickedness, the final word was one of absolute condemnation. Chapter 1, 104, verse 5 delivers this sobering verdict. But ye sinners, ye are accursed forever, and ye shall have no peace. There would be no second chances, no opportunity for reform, no escape from the consequences of their choices. The separation between the righteous and the wicked would be permanent and complete. The contrast between these two destinies couldn't have been more stark. Chapter 103, verse 4 emphasizes this division. Be hopeful in spirit and wait in hope. For formerly ye were disgraced through troubles and afflictions, But now ye shall shine as the lights of heaven. Ye shall shine and be visible, and the portals of heaven shall be opened to you. While the righteous would experience increasing glory and joy, the wicked would face increasing darkness and torment. Enoch's final blessing wasn't just wishful thinking or empty encouragement. It was prophetic certainty based on his direct knowledge of God's character and plan. Chapter 1, 108 verse 12 reveals the authority behind his words. And with that Son of Man shall they eat and lie down and rise up forever and ever. The righteous would share eternal fellowship with the Messiah himself, participating in his victory and glory for all eternity. The condemnation of sinners served not only as warning, but also as vindication of God's justice. Chapter 108 verse 15 confirms the finality of this judgment. And the righteous shall be glad, and sinners shall utterly perish, and the ungodly shall be destroyed from before the face of the Lord of spirits. Every injustice would be corrected, every wrong made right, every abuse of power punished with perfect justice. Enoch's final words brought his extraordinary journey full circle, ending where it began, with the absolute sovereignty and perfect justice of the God who had called him to witness these eternal truths. If these revelations have opened your eyes to truths you've never seen before, don't keep them to yourself. Hit that subscribe button right now and join our community of truth seekers who are discovering the hidden mysteries of Scripture. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these ancient prophecies. Your family, your friends, anyone who's searching for answers about what's really happening in our world. The Book of Enoch was almost lost to history, but today you've helped bring its secrets back to light. By subscribing and sharing, you're ensuring that these vital revelations reach the people who need them most. The truth doesn't spread itself. It needs faithful servants like you to carry it forward. Don't let this be the end of your journey into biblical mysteries. Subscribe now and get ready for our next exploration into the hidden depths of God's Word. The truth is waiting for those bold enough to seek it.